story from when I was studying with Mr. Julian Martin at the Juilliard School. In one lesson, I brought the slow movement of Beethoven's Opus 101, which is marked Adagio ma non troppo. And I played it with, in a very slow tempo with all seriousness. And after about 5 seconds, Mr. Martin stopped me. I looked at him and he said, "If you have quartos sound, you can play that tempo." At the time, I understood it in terms of just my tone quality not being resonant enough to sustain notes in long phrases in an excessively slow tempo. So I thought a lot about how to make each note more resonant by pressing the keys in different ways and experimenting with the subtle differences of how the tip of my fingers met the surface of the keys. But over the years, I thought about this again and again, and I think there was more to what Mr. Martin meant than how I understood it at the time. A pianist sound can be a very subjective thing to talk about, but it's not just about the acoustical result of just pressing down the keys. It also has very much to do with the horizontal aspect of sound, how the notes connect over time. And because a piano is essentially a percussive instrument where the hammers actually hit the strings to produce a sound, any note that's been played on the piano will quickly die away immediately after it's been played. Pianists need a little bit of imagination and intention to fill the space between any two notes. And how you play the next note will depend on your imagination. And because of this reason, I believe that when we talk about a pianist sound in general, it encompasses his or her imagination and not just the vertical aspect, the tone quality of how a note sounds. The Rachmaninoff D major Prelude is a breathtakingly beautiful piece, which I am working on right now. And I thought it would be perfect to illustrate some of these points and through this piece of music. You'll find the full performance at the end of this video. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you so much for watching.
As soon as a note is played on the keyboard, the sound quickly dies away. Unlike string players who can sustain a note and even increase the volume by using both pressure and speed, and wind players who can do the same with how they blow air into the instrument, there is nothing a pianist can do about a note that has already been played. Fingers not leaving the key before it strikes the next, which is often called the overlapping legato technique, connects the sounds, but there is a gap in the level of the volumes. A note played on the piano just dies away. So what we can hope to do is to create the illusion that the two notes are connected. Our imagination and the intention to fill the space creates the illusion to the listeners. So how do we do that? Well, I think the first thing is to listen. Because of the nature of our instrument that I just talked about, young pianists are often trained without listening skills. Listening not just to how you played a note, but between the notes. Our ears have to stay open at all times and adjust moment by moment. It is like your fingers need to listen to what they're doing and imagine how they want to play the very next note. In a slow piece like this, it is helpful to actually fill in the gap between the notes. A note you're holding on the keyboard is not just static, it still has movement. Without this movement, it is just a meaningless sound. Because it moves to and from one note to the next, from harmony to harmony in the way composer intended, sound becomes music. Practicing the melody this way, I'm filling in the space between the notes, and it is easy to think about how I want to move from one note to the next. And of course, it is important to practice the left hand. It cannot just be soft under the melody. It is the harmony, and it also sets the atmosphere of the music. And here you can see that there is actually a movement in my arm. This movement is not necessary to play the notes, and not moving at all or playing in a locked position would be against the flow of the music. I'm letting my arm be flexible so I can play the next note without being confined. And this is what not to do. I am locking my arms and my fingers are just striking the key straight down. And as I talked about in other videos, use flatter fingers for melodies in a slow piece like this. And here, another layer in the music appears above the melodic line. I look at it as 5 layers. The left hand has the bass line and the accompaniment. There are chords in the right hand, which are delineating the melody in its top line. And this new idea, which is like the softest breeze that gently sways. So the 2 hands and 10 fingers are all busy. In addition to playing these very, very quietly, I would actually try to minimize the shape of each one of these so that the longer melodic profile is not disturbed. And I wouldn't try to lock in the triplets in the top line with the duple in the left hand. That would sound unnatural. As the melody unfolds, it's very easy for the top line to get louder, so be very careful. This is the quietest moment in the whole piece before we build up to the climax. Ritardando and diminuendo prepare the moment, and I think it is totally magical when the highest pitch, the B, is played the softest. But it takes many tries before you get the timing the way you want. This is a big moment, and in order to sound full and not like you're screaming, make sure you're playing a strong octave in the left hand, and the right hand needs to release the chord right after playing it. Locking your elbow and holding on to the chord will not let you be flexible enough to play the next chord with full sonority. Here, despite the high notes in the background, make sure you're hearing the melody as a continuous line. You have to feel like you're sinking into the chords and floating on those high notes. Listen to the full resonance of your chord before you play that top note. It won't be too late. And rather than going straight from the chord to the top note, imagine that you are drawing an arch with your arm. Make sure you're not trying to get to those high notes as quickly as possible and landing on them. Feel like you're sinking into a thick cushion on those chords and feeling as light as a feather on those high notes. As musicians, our work starts from studying the music, notated as circles and lines on paper, and realizing the two-dimensional written down music into the sound space requires a lot of imagination and hard work at the instrument. For me, this part of the music making process is the most exciting, and I am happy to share a small part of it with you through these videos. And here's a whole performance of Rachmaninoff Prelude in D major. I hope you enjoy it, and have a great day.